Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Productions, kicking off the long-awaited, and we're super excited about it, Cymbal series today. This is the first episode of what's going to be a long trip about cymbals, about history, about everything about them, and yeah, we're going to start it today. If you're familiar with the show, which I'm guessing you are if you're here, then you will know that we have talked about tuning and tone and hacks and myth busting and all sorts of things about drums for technically years now, which is crazy to think about. And this is similar to where we're going with the cymbal business, but we're going to get a little bit deeper into physical characteristics of the cymbal that affect the behavior, the feel, the sound, all of that stuff. Because where there are things you can easily adjust on a drum and parts that come off and can be interchanged, a cymbal is just a piece of metal that you're hitting. And there are a lot of little things about it that affect how it behaves, how it compares to other cymbals, maybe in the same weight range or maybe in the same diameter range, that can make them super duper different. And all of this stuff is kind of how we get to the sounds that we want, rather than thinking like we do with drums about different drum heads or tuning or stuff like that. Over the course of this journey that we're going to go on, you can expect us to talk about construction in every sense of the expression with cymbals, how weight and size and everything about it affect the way it behaves, as well as kind of like hacks and mods and fixes and little things that we've discovered along the way in recording situations and live and everywhere else that can make the cymbals you have more versatile or maybe lead you to a sound that suits you a little bit better. And we're going to be using a variety of cymbals as well. We have a lot of them between the two of us here at the studio, so you're going to see a lot of our collections as well and learn about those. The first thing that we need to get out of the way when we're talking about cymbals is basically what we're going to cover today, which is how do we talk about cymbals? We've talked about a lot of different aspects of drums on the show, and we've used a lot of terminology, a lot of made-up words, a lot of words that are synonymous with other ones or that some people think are synonymous with other ones. And in talking about this and kind of getting it going, we decided that as a sort of kickoff, we should talk about and demonstrate the kind of primary words we're going to use to describe characteristics of the sound of cymbals in this series. I want to get out in front of this and say that none of these are like codified things. They're words that people use, and we are trying to show you right now what we mean when we say them. One person's dry is another person's pingy and things like that. So this is more about so you know what we mean when we're discussing the cymbals that we're going to be displaying in these videos. So let's jump right in. Again, there are lots of words we can use to describe these characteristics, and we're just going to touch on the ones that we're going to use the most. So first off is dry. This is a ride cymbal thing most of the time, so here we go. Let's talk about dry. Okay, so without going too far, our opinion about dry here is essentially the separation between the stick sound and the rest of the sound of the cymbal, the overtones, the undertones, all that stuff. Very separated, pretty short sustain, very kind of articulate, and in the case of this one, also kind of low-pitched. All right, next up, washy or wash. This is got to do with kind of the decay of the cymbal. Let's check this one out. Compared to dry, a lot more overtones, kind of a bigger, messier sound, a lot of stuff flying around. You can see the cymbal flopping around when I hit it really hard. Very different than the previous example, and still controllable, but a lot more going on in the kind of aftermath of the attack. All right, next up, pingy or pinginess. We'll just hit it. Pingy to me, this one is not a sound I go after that much. It's not a word that I use that much to describe cymbals, but for our purposes here, we're talking about really prominent stick definition that it sounds pingy. It sounds like a ping. It's worth noting also with this cymbal that it has a fairly defined or focused kind of pitch to it. When you hit it, you kind of hear one thing going away from that initial attack versus the washier previous cymbal, which leads us to now talking about focus. What does that mean? Now, this is another term that I don't use in dialogue that much with people about cymbals. If we're talking about focus, we're talking about clarity of the stick sound. It's not getting lost. It's very kind of prominent, but it's not pingy. It's got a little bit more of kind of an organic warmth to it. But for sure, at low volumes with a cymbal like this, you can play articulate patterns, and there's enough sort of focus in that sound to hear each little bit of it. Now, here's a great one. This is a broad one. Complex. The cymbal's pretty complex. Here we go. Complexity is one that I actually think about. I use that word to describe cymbals, and for me, it's kind of the opposite of focused. It's where it is really kind of messy in the overtones and kind of hard to say. I mean, trashy, like we could use the word trashy for this. It's not a particularly trashy cymbal. We're going to get to that. But there is a lot going on in the stick sound beyond just the pure initial tone of the stick sound. And as it decays, it kind of, I don't know what to call it. I picture like confetti or something like that. Like it's just sort of like sizzling all over the place. You know what I mean? All right, now, trashy. Another kind of broad one. We're going to do a couple of examples for trashy. There's going to be more about this in the future because it's a word that is used a lot now to describe sometimes specific cymbal companies. So 2 examples. We're going to start with one that is a traditional design and then one that is more of the China kind of design. So trashy's great because a cymbal can be a lot of different kinds of trashy, but basically what we're talking about is not a pure sort of traditional cymbal tone, but something that is much more dissonant and kind of wild and crazy. With the traditional kind of Chinese cymbal shape of the second example, you're dealing with a different kind of profile, which influences this. There's different amounts of tension. There's all of these things that, we're going to talk about all of this, but you can have varying degrees of this. My personal favorite trashy cymbal is actually an unfinished cymbal that you'll also see in the future here. It's a blank that I use all the time. And trashy cymbals have gone from being an effect thing to being some people's kind of main sound, and are super popular right now, which is super fun for me because I love that stuff. You can think of, to me, trashiness as being sort of a maximum version of complex, where maybe the purest sound would be like a cymbal disc, like a crotale or a bell, where it's just a pure pitch, and then this huge arc of slowly growing complexity until you end up at something that's really super duper trashy. And finally, the classics, bright and dark. We're going to start with bright. Bright, to me, just means high-pitched. Basically, the overtones are high, the decay is high, the sound of the bell with a stick on that cymbal is high, and they are great for cutting through a mix. They're great for sitting on top of things. They occupy a very high frequency range. And on the other side is dark. Let's check that one out. Dark is just the opposite. It's lower in pitch. The decay is a lower sort of pitch. It kind of blends into the music a little bit more. Even if I'm using bright ride cymbals or bright crashes, I still use dark hi-hats most of the time because they don't need to be that loud, particularly in recording situations. A lot of times thinner cymbals can be darker. A lot of times thicker cymbals can be brighter. There's no hard and fast rules here. Suffice it to say, those things are kind of overarching qualities of every cymbal. You can say pretty much anyone you come across is either in the bright category or leaning toward the dark side. So that about sums it up. These are the primary terms that we're going to be using for describing these instruments that we're going to be taking apart and analyzing and modding and messing with over the course of this whole thing that we're going to do. There's probably going to be some other words that will get used here and there as we come upon characteristics that we need to describe, but as you go forward and follow us along on this, feel free to reference back to this if you're not sure, if you want to just kind of check in again about what we're talking about when we use this kind of terminology. And again, just to reiterate, these are not textbook definitions. We are setting our own kind of lexicon for how we're going to describe these things. These are what they mean to us. It's okay to have whatever terms you want to use. When we were working this out, I had a whole bunch that Ben had never heard, and he had a whole bunch that I was like, I don't really know what that means. So we worked together to come up with this, and we're feeling pretty good about it. There's going to be a lot of different instruments involved in this, sometimes combinations of them, and everything from run-of-the-mill things from the factory to vintage pieces to things that have been severely modded by friends of ours in the neighborhood. And we're super excited about it. We are super curious about terminology that you would use to describe your cymbals or characteristics of those cymbals, especially if it lays similar to what we were talking about here, but maybe you would choose a different word to describe those characteristics. Because our goal here is mainly to just be as clear as we can and to make sure that this can be as educational as possible. So a dialogue about how to describe these sounds would be super duper fun, and anything in particular that you like aspects of cymbals that you look for, whether it's complexity or focus or any of those kinds of things, let us know in the comments. We're super curious.